I'm Whitney.
I'm Mindy.
And I'm Deb.
We're three best friends who love nerdy things.
Well, some people think we're nerdy, but we think we're pretty awesome.
This is Our Nerdiest Thing.
This season, we are discussing Jennifer L. Armentrout's From Blood and Ash, all of the books in that series, plus the Flesh and Fire series as well. We are spoiler friendly, so listen at your own risk. Hello, fellow nerds, and welcome to Our Nerdiest Thing. Today we are talking about From Blood and Ash, chapters 14, 15, and 16.
Yay!
Before we get into it, Deb, will you please share about our nerdiest cocktail?
Of course. So this cocktail is called Here, Hold My Veil, which I think is really, really awesome. It's Macon Muddle's take on a Negroni. So it's the perfect balance of kick ass and fun in one glass.
Oh.
Right? Okay, so it's got gin, Campari, the Macon Muddle spiced cherry vanilla syrup, and some Antica vermouth. It's quite tasty. Really wonderful for
that
a
spiced cherry vanilla syrup.
I know.
It's
still
so
my
good.
favorite.
It gets me every time.
Yep.
So, yeah, mix this all up and drink. It's delicious.
But make sure you have someone hold your veil.
That's right.
If you're 21 and over.
And you have to kill some craven.
Those are very specific guidelines for being able to have this cocktail.
I mean, you can have it anytime you want, but if you're going to kill some craven, drink this first.
Yeah.
And then have
Definitely,
someone
yeah.
hold your veil.
Mindy, will you spin the wheel o names and see who is doing our 30-second Our Nerdiest recap?
Let's see here. Oh, usually I spin it already, but I haven't.
Who's it gonna be? Is it me?
No, it's Deb.
It's Deb. You can
I felt
do
like I was on
it.
Delicious Dish. It was like, that's neat.
All right.
I was so nervous.
Are you ready?
No.
Well, here we go.
So we start this chapter with Poppy being in serious pain, and Tawny has to stay up and wipe salve all over her back because she has big welts from that piece of shit, Duke Tierman. And then she's doing all better, and she notices the lights start going out on the rise. Holy shit! And there's Mist, and there's Craven, and she goes out onto a archer's keep to try to shoot some Craven in the face, and then holy shit, Hawk's there! And he's like, "You're a stunningly beautiful, murderous creature. We need to talk about this."
I like your personal commentary.
I do too.
It added a lot of flavor
It did.
to the recap.
Quite the flair.
Did we need it?
Yes.
Okay.
That was no hate.
Always.
That was appreciation for your flair.
Holy shit, we need to talk about this.
Oh man, that was good. That was better than I was gonna do. Like, yeah, she was on the rise.
Neat.
Yeah. The end.
I like how she shoots a Craven while his mouth is open. How
Yeah.
badass is that? I can't wait
Yeah.
to talk about that part.
Ugh. Mindy, will you please do our nerdiest vocabulary?
I would love to. So for the vocabulary this week, there really wasn't a ton to draw from, but I wanted to look into the rise and what, like historically what a rise was and like what is it? Because when I'm reading it, I didn't feel like I really understood what it was and what it looked like. So I wanted to get a good, nice picture.
Is it like a rock wall?
It is.
Okay,
and
that's
I
how I
will,
picture
I will
it, too.
get to that. But when I was doing my research, I actually couldn't really find anything historically where there was something actually called a rise. So I kind of had to piece it together. But a very, very cool fact I found that I never would have thought of while I was doing this was there is actually a difference between a castle and a palace.
Ooh.
Right? So I always thought they were interchangeable, right?
Which one's better?
Well, it depends on what you want to use it for. So
Tell me more.
they're both considered the residence of a lord or a noble, but a palace is actually more for like leisurely activities and leisure time and just milling about and living.
That's the one I want.
And then but if you were in a war and there were craven about, you would want a castle because it's a fortified place of residence. So it acts as a fortress, and you're a lot more safe in a castle than you would be in a palace. And the word castle actually comes from the Latin castellum, which means fortified place.
Or Castile. Fortified penis.
I love that.
Like fortified with vitamins, like cereal.
Stays hard, takes a licking, keeps on ticking. That kind of fortification.
And
all right.
on that note, let's talk about the rise. And by rise, I do not mean penis rising.
Oh, man. You saw it in my eyes, didn't you?
I did.
This whole episode is already off the rails. Was it 2 minutes in?
5.
Did you expect
Fuck
any
you very
less?
much. I had a 30-second countdown. It's been longer than 2 minutes.
Sorry, Mindy, tell us more.
Okay, so when I went back to look and see what I thought I could come up with as a description for the rise, which I could not find associated with cities or castles, but it is, I would say it most resembles what was called a defensive wall that would surround a town or a city. Okay, and there are, in this chapter, they describe there's trenches in front of it where they actually put flammable material so that they can create a wall of fire in front of it.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Don't you love how
Thank
I'm
you.
using my hands to like tell you and nobody can see it but you guys?
We can.
It's helping me.
It's very important.
So I really wanted to focus on how Poppy got from her room in the castle to the rise, because I'm still not super certain how far away the castle is from the actual rise, because the rise is around the entire city, right? The castle is just one part of it.
But it made it sound like she was able to kind of jump from the castle to the rise. It doesn't sound like she has to get down, does it?
She doesn't have to get down, but only because there's a bridge. So there's pathways in the castle that she uses to get out, and then she says they connected, this is a quote, nearly every part of the stronghold. And a stronghold is basically any place that's been fortified to protect against the attack. So,
Okay.
so that's, anywhere that has any kind of like walls built up or anything, anywhere that there's places you can store weapons, any kind of thing like that. So she talks about there's a stone bridge that leads out to the rise. And this is where I don't know how far the distance of this is, but Poppy sees houses and shops below while she's running. So she's running over the town on this bridge.
She's such a badass.
She really is. And apparently it's super narrow, okay? So once she gets to the end of the bridge, she actually has to climb up onto the wider ledge of the rise. So there's this bridge, this narrow bridge that goes to it, and it connects to this stone wall of the rise. So she's up high, and then she goes up a little higher, if that makes sense. So finally, once she's on this rise, which is really, it's really just the wall. It's like 4 walls around the city, because she also talks about something goes up, like they send horns sound from the 4 corners of the rise. So it's definitely in like a big square. And she goes up to what's called a battlement, and she climbs a ladder to get there. And a battlement is a wall that has gaps in it so that you can fire weapons out of while you're still staying hidden. And this is, when you're picturing it, when I would look up pictures of it, it's exactly what you would think, like when you're drawing a castle as a kid, even the sort of like tooth, they look like teeth coming
Right,
up.
yeah.
So that's the battlement, is when they've got that, and there's the holes that she's shooting the arrows out of. But then you can duck down and get behind it, and it's a defensive piece.
I'm picturing Robin Hood from the 80s. They had a battlement in that.
I mean, yeah, that's exactly. I really feel like exactly what you would think a castle looked like if you were going to go draw a castle.
Right.
That's what it is. So anyway, I got a much better picture of it as I was looking through the, like I had to really like focus on where she was going and what it said, and to even get this mental picture. I would love, if I were an artist, I would draw it, but I'm not.
JLA, put your people on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. In addition to the map of the whole country,
Exactly.
we need a map of
I
the
need to know
castle
what
and the rise.
actually looks like. But I mean, I'd always imagined, like you said, Deb, that the rise was right there, like attached to the castle, where she barely had to go very far at all.
That's
but
how
she
I
really
pictured
did.
it too. Yeah.
She has to go through part of the city.
She's
to
not
get
even
there.
winded. Damn.
I know.
know.
How does she eat cheese and bacon all the time, can run, and shoot a bow and arrow? She's my dream woman.
Because
Yeah.
she trains.
oh, yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
dumb.
I'll just do the eating part. Thank you.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mindy. The rise is a really important part of this section. But before we get there, we unfortunately have to go back to the Duke's office first.
Sucker.
So the context for the beginning of this section is she's just been beaten by the Duke and Lord Mazine and made to partially undress and expose the top half of her body to these disgusting people. And then she finally gets to leave to find that Victor is now waiting for her outside, not Hawk, which she is like super relieved about, because she was like, he is so freaking observant. He would 1000% know like something was going on, and I really just don't want to deal with that. I don't want to talk to him about it. I don't want to talk to Victor about it, and Victor already knows like everything.
Isn't that sad how she just feels like she can't be even completely honest with Victor? Like,
she lies to him.
Because she doesn't want to feel like she's giving the Duke exactly what he wants.
And see, that was really reading it carefully, or reading it more carefully than I would normally read this section, was really surprising, I guess, because I got the idea, I guess, that Victor actually does not know exactly everything that's going on inside the Duke's office. He definitely knows that the Duke is like beating her.
Right.
But it seems to me, the way that this was written, that he does not know that there's an audience sometimes, that Mazine is in there sometimes.
That from him.
Right. She purposefully does not tell him that.
Well, and the guards don't tell him either.
Right. Yeah. And that's not the first time that Mazine has been in there, right? Because she's talking about previous times that Mazine was there.
She makes it sound like he's in there most of the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it seems like Victor is like very unaware of that.
Yes.
And I had a really difficult time with this section of the passage that we read for today, because, you know, Victor knows that the Duke is beating her. Victor knows that the Duke is breaking all these supposed rules that she's supposed to have as the chosen and the maiden, right? Victor knows that she is being punished for stupid crap that's not anything, right?
Victor also knows that the welts are on her back, which means she's either lifting her skirt or lowering her bodice.
Yeah.
They're not hitting her through her clothes.
Oh, I thought you meant she was doing that with Victor.
No,
I'm
saying
no.
Victor is around enough to know where her welts are and that her clothing aren't torn.
Yeah.
So he knows she has to be partially
exposed
nude
somehow.
Right.
Yeah.
And she even talks about how like the guards won't look her in the eye when she walks out of there, because they know too. And I'm with you. This really, really bothered me, because he even says, you have no reason to pretend with me. And I'm like, doesn't she? What the fuck are you going to do?
Exactly.
Beating her's not bad enough? What else does she need to tell you?
That's what that is what I struggled with the most in this section. So kind of like last time we were talking about, like, this Hawk, can he not hear what the Duke is saying to her? Because we talked about how Poppy doesn't really talk, doesn't make any noise, doesn't like yell or cry while she's being beaten.
But a cane is loud.
Cane is loud. Exactly. And so it's like, how does Hawk not know what's going on in this room? And then it's kind of like the flip side. Victor knows pretty much everything that's going on in that room, and he just doesn't do anything. And he's like angry about it, not at her, but he's angry at the Duke, and he's like, you know, it's not your fault that you were in a room when other people walked in. Like, that's why he punished you. And it's like, freaking do something about it then.
This is the equivalent of thoughts and prayers.
Right.
Well, and here's what really, really, really bothered me about it, and I just noticed this in this reread. Victor actually, like, to your point, he starts he's not blaming her, but he's talking about, like, this is why you can't be testing the Duke at other, why,
be careful.
Yeah. And they talk about how Victor trains her to fight. And he doesn't hesitate to say that he would take any punishment he was given for training Poppy to fight. He's not afraid to be punished, right? If he gets found out. So why doesn't he go to someone?
Okay. So I'm never going to make excuses for anyone. The only thing I can think of, though, is that if he knows if he gets killed, who's going to take care of her?
And
right.
That's
if he gets removed from his position. Even not killed, but just removed.
I mean, I think if he said something, though, they would flat out kill him.
Oh, yeah. I think that, too. But and I know that the frustration and the anger that he has in this scene is it's very clearly not directed toward Poppy. And I think it's very clear to me that he's frustrated with himself, right? Like I think Victor feels very helpless, but he isn't actually helpless, But I keep going back and forth, because we talked about this last time too. Like, what is the deal with the Duke and Poppy, right? And I did not remember this part of Poppy kind of like talking this out with herself for us as the reader. she says, was I just looking for a reason for his treatment, as if there had to be something to explain his cruelty? Sometimes there was no reason. Yeah. And I wrote down, I am Poppy. like I'm looking for that reason of not just why is the Duke the way that he is with her specifically, but I'm also looking for that reason of, why is Victor not doing anything? Because I want to be able to be like, well, see, he's still a good guy. Right? Like, this is why he didn't do any, you know what I mean? And that's hard emotionally, I feel like.
She also says a person, whether ascended or not, was who they were with no explanation.
Right. Like, it just is.
You are who you are.
Yeah.
So we asked this last time, too, like, could Hawk hear anything? What was going on there? And we're really interested in his point of view in this, right? Whenever that new story comes out. So he does send Victor's, like, a steward to Victor to say, like, hey, can you come over here? Because I'm a little freaked out. I wonder if Hawk could hear it, but he knew if he went in, he'd be removed.
I'm really interested in that, too, because I'm going to talk more about this a little bit later. But I looked up, because we're in the J-Landers Facebook group, the Jennifer L. Armentrout kind of like reader group. And she is writing, or I mean, I guess now she's finished writing it. But while she was writing the Hawk POV, which as of right now has not been released, she was posting a lot of teaser quotes from the work in progress. So sometimes she posts these teasers and they end up not being actually in the released book. But there were a couple of quotes that weren't it wasn't confirmed that they were about this scene, but it seemed to me that they probably were, because there was one teaser that she posted that was Hawk talking to somebody, which I assume would be Victor, but it's Hawk saying, like, she seemed really upset and she looked back at me like she needed that reassurance that I was still going to be here, and like something really weird is going on, like what is this about? And that made me question too what you just said, like maybe he did hear the beginnings of something and was like, okay, what's going on? I can't just bust up in there, but maybe if I go get Victor could do something about it.
I think that Hawk maybe assumed that Victor knew more and was able to stop things from happening.
Yeah, well, and he's right about half of that.
Yeah.
But knowing Hawk and how reactive he is, I don't think that if Victor knew, like if he thought Victor knew something and then didn't stop it, he would have killed Victor.
Agreed.
I actually don't agree with that.
Well, fuck off. I'm kidding. I would love to hear your point of view.
No, I don't. I think that he would want to kill Victor, but I think that at this point he's still, I mean, we've talked about, like, it seems very clear he's super head over heels for Poppy, but he's also still very conflicted with what he's there to, like, what his plan is and what he's realizing that he feels for her. But later in a few chapters we're going to see, he and Victor kind of go toe to toe, and he says to Victor, Victor says, like, over my dead body. And Hawk is like, the only reason that I'm not doing that is because she sees you as a father. And if I hurt you, it would absolutely devastate her. And that is the only reason that I'm not doing that.
But at this point,
you know what I mean?
I don't think he really knows that. So if it were...
No, but he also doesn't feel as strongly for Poppy yet. True. We still have a whole week, Mindy.
Under the willow tree.
Right. There's a whole week between like this day and the willow tree.
Not forget about the willow tree.
Yeah, but yeah, I think he's still like kind of confused about how he feels about her, so he doesn't feel that strongly yet. You know what I mean?
I still think though that it's when you're looking at it and you're weighing, like, do I tell somebody and give myself up and basically not have, she won't have this one person to protect her like I always have, or continue to allow her to get beaten to the point where she can't move. You're choosing the quote lesser of two evils, but at that point too, you're also choosing that Poppy. You're saying, and I guess you are saying that Poppy can take care of herself, but that's not how they normally act towards her.
She does emotionally take care of herself.
No, she totally
in this
does.
situation.
I'm not saying that she doesn't. I'm saying from their point of view, they're basically saying, well, Poppy can take care of herself, but she can't because they want to be there. It's very conflicting to me.
This goes back to last season, though, when we did an episode where we talked about how horrible people come into power, right? And we talked about Hitler's regime. And one of the things in all of these psychological studies that have been done is it could be worse.
That's true.
That like they're not killing her, they're not raping her,
and
they're
she
not.
actually says that.
Right. It could be worse,
Yeah.
but like, and she even says at some point that she's like, I have every luxury, and I wrote, no, you don't.
Yeah.
Right.
Being covered and being in a room for hours at a time by yourself and not being allowed to talk to anyone
That's not a
is not
luxury.
comfort or luxury.
Well, and I think too, it's important to in this whole conversation about Victor and her other guards, you know, in the past that don't do anything. We as readers struggle with Victor's lack of action way more than Poppy ever does. Right? Like
Right.
Well, that's her normal.
Well, yeah, but
And
you know,
she's protective of him too, because she knows that he'll get in trouble if he
right,
says anything.
right. And I think Deb, your point a little bit ago about if Victor loses his job or gets killed, whatever, like he is the main person who is Poppy's family and source of love and care and really truly protecting her in a lot of different ways, not from the Duke's abuse, but in a lot of other ways. Right. And if he's not there, who's going to do that?
So
right.
in that instance, he can't protect her from the beating or anything else. At least this way, he has other ways to protect her.
Right. I do think
Yeah.
that that's really
Which
valid.
is still not okay, I want to say, for
Right,
true.
right.
any abuse survivor.
Yes.
It's definitely
It's
not,
not
okay.
okay.
Right. Right. I
just-
understand his thought process.
Well, and that's why this has been good to talk through.
Oh, Victor?
Yeah.
Talking about Victor? I know. I wrote down, like, because he is a Victor, he's supposed to, like, help Poppy. And he definitely does, right? Like, teaching her how to fight and protect herself is extremely important in a lot of different scenarios throughout the whole series. But I'm like, I want there to be, because he is a Victor and is connected to the fates, I want there to be a bigger purpose for this, like, abuse and allowing
Right.
that to happen. And I just don't think there is. You know, like, I want there to be some kind of explanation, but I think that it's just JLA, like, showing us the evil of the people that are in power and the Ascended and Poppy's part of her characterization, you know?
It's interesting because I've never thought about Victor being a morally gray character, and he kind of is.
He kinda is.
I mean, he really
He is like revered as this father figure at first glance, but if you're really thinking about it, he has good intentions,
Yeah.
but he's not always doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and we've talked about this before, but that is a theme throughout the books, right? This is an ongoing conversation that Poppy has with herself and with Hawk about Victor. Like, you know, he was wonderful, he was great, but he also let this stuff happen, right? And she, again, does not really struggle with it the same way
The same way
that we
as
do.
readers, I
Yeah,
know.
and that Hawk, I think, ultimately struggles with
Yeah.
the fact that he let stuff happen.
I think any person that has survived abuse your mind has to come up with excuses or it breaks you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true of anything that happened, any horrible trauma, right?
Right. Yeah,
like
yeah.
you want to blame it on something. And it's the same thing with, back to my true crime, the family members of serial killers really want to find some kind of like psychiatric diagnosis or some trauma that happened to them as children or
Something to make sense of it all.
Yes, something to blame it on, right? Like it wasn't just something that happened to my kid. Like
Yeah.
there needs to be a specific thing to blame. And that's exactly where I am with Victor and all these and the Duke, right? And like I want a clean, logical explanation. And I don't think that I'm going to get one. And so
probably
I have to
not.
mentally prepare myself for that.
And we have to remember that this entire society is based in fear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. And this is just
And
one
lies.
example of
Yeah.
that.
On a lighter note, but on the same subject, how hilarious was it that Victor pulled rank on Hawk?
She said, how did that go over?
He said, like an avalanche.
I really like that,
That
too.
was a cute little.
But I think
interchange.
Victor really likes that because he knows that Hawk will be like that with Poppy too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then cut to Poppy's back in her room. She's been kind of recovering from her beating. And I don't think I ever realized that this scene with the Craven and the Rise is in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
I don't
Oh,
think
really?
I knew that it was at nighttime, but I don't think I ever realized
That she'd been woken up. by her
yes, that
dreams
she had
or
been
nightmares.
asleep and woke up because of a nightmare. I just didn't realize that.
The other thing that jumped out to me as I was reading this that could easily be glossed over. Did you notice that she says, "I was lucky I healed quickly"?
Yes.
Is
Yeah, I
that
noticed that
foreshadowing?
too.
Yeah.
Right?
That's some
Well-
Atlantean blood in there.
Yeah.
Right. And I wondered too, the medicine that they are not giving her, but like putting on her wounds. I wondered if that's something from the gods, because it made me think of A Shadow in the Ember when Sarah gets her headaches and she's like, they're like, Nikto says, we've got this special tea for you. And she's like, oh, is it blah, blah, blah? And he's like, well, how do you know that? And she's like, oh, well, my Sir Holland gives that to me, whatever. Like,
what
he wasn't supposed to know that,
Right.
know?
I wonder if there is Atlantean blood in that salve from Malek.
Oh.
And that's why it heals her.
Brother bear?
Brother bear. Yeah.
Brother bear.
Because we know that their blood
Yeah.
has healing properties, the
Right.
elemental Atlanteans.
It might.
Because, so we know she also never gets sick. She
Yeah.
heals pretty quickly. But then her wounds are external and they're obviously rubbing something on there. So I do think there's got to be something like that.
Yeah,
in the salve.
either they've added his like Atlantean essence or whatever. There's the title of the episode.
No creamy
Atlantean.
No creamy salves, please.
Or it's like a special recipe that they had in like Elysium.
Some guys think it's a special recipe. Figure out how to say this better.
Listeners, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I've taken us down this path. But yeah, I felt really bad for her. Like, she's just stuck in her room by herself. She had a nightmare and there's not anybody there for her to talk to comfort her, to be like, hey, it's okay. It was just a dream. And she's missing her brother and wondering if he still has nightmares, and looking out into the dark night and being like, whew, all the torches are still lit.
Oh, wait, no, they're not.
Yeah, thank goodness there's at least no Craven tonight, and then, and then there are. Yes. Then there are all the Craven in the world. It seems like, in general, before we get into like the specifics of the Craven attack and her running out to the rise, it seemed like she was surprised at how many Craven there were, and it seemed like she was surprised that they were climbing up the rise. Like she reacted in a way.
She says they don't seem as old as the other ones.
Yeah.
They seem newly formed.
So that made me think of I Am Legend.
Yeah, or the World War Z.
Yes, World War Z. I was going to say Z for zombie, but that's
Is that a Disney show?
No, it's from New Girl. It's Nick's. It's Nick Miller's novel.
That's right.
It's Nick's novel, Z for zombie. But no, it made me feel like, are we supposed to think that they're like evolving somehow?
Well,
And
she does mention after that too that they, besides their thirst for blood, they also have an instinct for survival.
yeah,
So, as each Craven attack comes on, like she talks about how they let the horses or the cavalry out or whatever they call them.
yeah, the huntsman,
and when they come out, she says they need to start doing that sooner because now they're climbing up these walls. And I wonder if that's like the more that they get out there defensively, the next thing comes where they think, oh, well, next I have to survive like this. Next I have to do this.
And
Please
she
remind
says-
me, did we figure out in a previous episode that the Ascended cannot control the Craven?
I don't think, as far as we have seen, they only control the Craven by keeping them like kennelled, basically.
And then releasing
But they
And then
couldn't tell.
releasing
They
them.
couldn't put in the Craven's mind like climb the tower.
Right.
Okay.
They say that the Dark One can do that.
But you know
But
what they
that's
could
not
do
true.
is corral them somewhere
In
where
a
there's a
specific-
wall
a
that they
specific
could
space.
learn to climb.
But
the wall.
also, I wonder if there is like a mental deterioration, right? So if they are newly turned, would that still be an instinct to climb?
I don't know, because this whole scene and all of her observations of the Craven made me feel like we were going to like an I Am Legend kind of thing where the Craven are evolving and they're getting smarter and, like the zombies are learning and they're going to be harder to defeat. But then I feel like after this, throughout the rest of the series,
they're all pretty dumb.
it's just not a thing anymore. Like it's those observations don't continue to happen. And so I'm confused by that.
I wonder how often, though, to her point, even saying about the horsemen, how often the Craven get this close to the rise. Maybe they could always climb that, and they've never gotten that close before.
Right.
Well, because she says when she's talking about, they need to send those guys out faster.
Yeah.
She says something like, I don't think they expected the Craven to be able to climb up
Right,
there. And I'm like, have they not ever done that before?
But
Like,
if you think
Well,
of
she acts like
to
it's the
me.
first time they've ever done that.
Right.
if you think of any feral animal, though, right? Like that is trying to get to food, they will jump and lunge for things.
Yeah, and I keep trying to remind myself that Poppy and the other guards are mortals. And because I'm like, well, this has been happening for hundreds of years, right? And so like the Ascended have probably seen the Craven do all kinds of things, but these people haven't because they're mortal and they've only been around for like 20 years or however old they are, right? So, I mean, maybe that would explain it, but it was just weird to me because it just seemed like she was like, oh, they're not as dead looking and they seem smarter, but then that just goes away after this.
I also want to point out that the Ascended are the ones responsible for when the horsemen go out and when the guards go out.
That's true.
And again, this is a form of fear, and Duke Tierman even uses it in a subsequent chapter to be like, well, you know, we upset the gods and now we've got the Craven, like the mist came in. And so you have to wonder too if they're like, well, hold on, let's let them eat a couple people because they need to understand what happens when they don't obey.
Which they're absolutely doing, right?
100%.
And it just adds, I don't know. I feel like every time I've read this book, it's like, yes, Ascended equal bad. I get it. But really thinking about it as deeply as we do, reading these small pieces, it's like, oh my gosh, like diabolically evil layer upon layer upon layer of like how horrible they are. And I don't think I've ever truly gotten it.
Well,
before.
We even know, like, there's not even a fear of the Ascended getting bitten because it says the Duke will be hiding in his room behind a dozen royal guards, if not more, right alongside the Duchess. So they don't have to worry about it. They're using it as a tactic to keep people in line, and they know that when they need to get put down, they can get put down.
Yeah.
Well, and that made me think too, like, not only that's a dual purpose too. Not only is it like they're the Ascended and they need to be protected and that's why they hide out. But like if they were out there and they did get bit and they didn't have the consequence that normally comes, it would out them.
Right. 100%.
Well, yeah,
So,
that is very true.
But well, because we've talked a million times that an Ascended could easily take a Craven down.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So Poppy sees that the Craven's coming, and that basically triggers her like trauma, right? And she goes back to being a helpless child where the Craven attacked and killed her family and is like, I will not let that happen again. So she is going to run out to the Rise to help fight against the Craven. And Tawny made me laugh because, I mean, obviously she cares about her friend. She genuinely cares about Poppy, even though Poppy questions, like, is she really my friend or is she only nice to me because she has to be my friend?
There is something, because I know we've talked about that a couple of times, that I underlined in this passage where Poppy says, nothing is infallible, Tawny, not even the Rise. And it says, Tawny says, neither are you, her lower lip trembling. And that was a moment for me because I was like, she really does love Poppy.
Yes, like she
really
is her true friend and she doesn't want her to get hurt. But it made me laugh when she was like, if you don't come back, they're going to make me work for the priestesses and then I can't have sex.
But then she's also like, please tell me your head is not resting above a sword every night. No wonder you have nightmares.
I know, yes.
But yeah, I caught
she's
that.
Funny.
I caught that thing about sex too because Tawny is a little bit an underrated sidekick when it comes down 100%. To it. Because I caught that too, like where she's like, well, fuck, if I'm in the temple, who am I going to have sex with?
Right. They're going to make me horrible. Yeah, they're going to make me be celibate. I don't want to do that. I don't want to work for the Duchess. She's horrible. Yeah, it made me laugh a lot. I really love how Poppy and Tawny are able to just be funny. You know what I mean? Like they bring humor because we talked about that when Poppy fought Jericho, right? Yeah. Like she's still sarcastic and she still's got that like bite to her, and they're both really funny, and they're able to keep that even in these high pressure, high stress, kind of very traumatic and dramatic situations. You know,
I have a question that maybe doesn't really follow this, but before we get to the Rise, I noticed it's something that I think could easily be skipped over, but there's one little part where Poppy's talking, or to herself, actually, she's thinking, and she talks about her ascension, and she says it's to ensure the entire future of the kingdom. Do we know, like, what they've told her the ascension is actually for? Like, to me, it still seems very vague. Like, does she even know why she's supposed to be ascending, or just because she's the maiden?
It's because she's the maiden. It is extremely.
I mean, obviously,
vague.
We know why they want her, but like, I don't know.
From you're talking about, like, what does she know? What did
they tell her?
They have told her that she is going to ascend. She is going to be given to the gods. It's this super prestigious thing because there's only been one other maiden, and for some reason, everybody else's ascension is tied to hers.
Right.
Yeah.
But
So
she
her,
says-
they're just telling her that her ascension is enabling all these other people to ascend as well.
So that's
And-
where she gets the future of the kingdom.
Yes.
Okay.
And all these other people ascending is like continuing the natural order of the kingdom.
Okay. That makes more sense to me. But I was very confused when I read that. And I was like, do we even know like what she thinks she's ascending for?
No, that's
Yeah.
that's the thing. Like they've told her you're super important, and then that's basically all they've
Yeah.
told her. And
Yeah.
so, because we talked before, when she questions like, what exactly? They're all like, hush, don't ask questions, just do what
You're
we say.
offending the gods by
Yeah,
asking.
like
Yeah,
just
that is
trust,
true, yeah.
just trust the gods, and we're not going to tell. No one can tell you anything, and it's like what? But yeah, I wrote that, or I underlined that line too, and it was just like, actually, no, like. Your ascension, the way that Queen Ileana Isbeth wanted it to happen, literally you'd be dead, number one, because
Right.
the plan is to kill you.
Yeah.
And we don't know that until the very end of book 4, right?
Right.
The plan is to kill you, but also the plan is to kill you to raise this horrible, like primal god who is probably going to destroy everything.
Do we
Which
know?
will change the future of the kingdom.
Yeah, but not,
So, I mean, like...
not to uphold the future of the kingdom.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And do we know why Isbeth wants to raise Colas? We don't, right?
We don't. We know it's time for Blood and Ash story time. We don't know really specifically, except that Isbeth tells Poppy that ultimately her goal is to destroy not just Atlantia, but to destroy as much as she can to get back at Nyktos, because Isbeth blames Nyktos, the king of gods, for everything that has happened to her, the loss of her son, the loss of her heartmate in Malek. So Callum...
Maybe don't be a crazy bitch.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I don't think she always was a crazy bitch, though. Like, that's part of the story, right? Is like, what was she like before? But at this point, she is definitely a crazy bitch. So we see that Callum, who is a character that is in the Flesh and Fire books, he is a part of Colas's court somehow, but we still don't have the full story of him. Apparently, we're going to get the full explanation in book 3, the third Flesh and Fire book, which is A Fire in the Flesh. But he is in the prequels, and he's in Colas's court, and he is also in book 4, War of Two Queens, and he is there in Solus with Queen Ileana / Isbeth. So somehow this god from Colas's court has survived these hundreds and hundreds of years and is helping Ileana Isbeth. I keep calling her Ileana, which I'm like, I don't know why I'm doing that, but
Well, that was her name
Because
for a long
that's
time.
and
That's
that's
one
what
of her
she's
names,
called
yeah.
right now.
well, yeah, that's true. Maybe that's why I'm doing it. Thank you. I am not wrong. Good job. But yeah, he is there somehow giving her this information. We are presuming, or at least I am, that Callum is giving her this information about Colas and what she needs to do, and she needs to sacrifice her daughter to do all this stuff. But we don't actually know like how he even got there to her, how she became the Queen of Solus, or any of that stuff.
Right.
That's still like
or
not
why she even trusts him.
right,
Yeah.
or like which I think it's just she wants to get back at Nyktos, and I feel like Callum is like, well, if you hate Nyktos, do I have the guy for you?
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Because this guy
His
also
brother.
yeah, this guy, his uncle.
Oh, his uncle.
His
I'm
uncle.
sorry.
This guy also hates Nyktos, right? So, but we don't know for sure.
Yeah.
Did that actually answer your question?
Sure.
What was the question originally?
I don't know.
Sorry.
I'm sure you answered someone's question.
And I probably created 55 more questions.
My question was why does Isbeth want to raise Colas,
Yeah.
like Colas, instead of anyone else to kind of help
Yeah.
her get her revenge?
Yeah, the only thing we know is that she's motivated by getting, like, she wants to destroy Nyktos, basically.
Yeah. Vengeance gets you nowhere, friends.
Yeah. I feel like I'm realizing that was a really long answer. That didn't need to be that long.
But it was from Blood and Ash Storytime.
Well, that's true. And that concludes From Blood and Ash Storytime.
So now let's get to the rise.
Yeah, so she goes out to the rise, and you kind of talked through in the vocab section of her like running through the castle, down the servants' staircase, going across the bridge to the rise, right? And she just immediately like, she clearly has done this before, right? Like she knows exactly where she needs to go. She knows exactly what she's doing. She knows what she's looking for, and she's like, here are my arrows. Yeah. Here's my bow. There are the Craven. Come on, guys, let's go.
Oh my gosh. Did you write that down and plan that?
I didn't. I just thought of it.
Here are my arrows. Here is my bow. Come on, guys. Let's go.
No, there are the Craven. Come
Let's
on,
go.
guys. Let's go. Sorry, I saw the opportunity and I just
Whitney,
I took it.
You amaze me every day. I'm so lucky to have you in my life.
Dr. Seuss has nothing on you.
Yeah, oh yeah, I'm the new Dr. Seuss. That's what everybody's saying. I'm very embarrassed that I just did that now, but that's okay.
That was actually really great.
Yeah, so she basically is like major badass awesome, right? Like that's basically what she does.
She shoots a Craven in the face that's trying to attack Victor, and he literally turns around and looks at her and is like, thank you, but what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah, she said he's like a mixture of being proud and also like
irritated.
Yeah, like annoyed. Like, come on. I mean, thank you, but
picture that
come
look.
on.
Like I so pictured that look for Victor.
I feel like I give that look to my children.
I think I do
We're
too.
like, that was really funny, and you have a good point, but you're not allowed to say that to me.
Yeah,
exactly.
don't do that again.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she talks about she's got all these arrows that have bloodstone arrowheads, and the shaft, which made me giggle when I read it, is made of wood from blood forest.
Most shafts
trees.
are made from wood.
But boom.
This is what I bring to the podcast.
But we love it. Yeah, and she just is taking down Craven like left and right, and she's also giving us all those observations that we were talking about earlier, right? Where it seems like she is surprised at how the Craven are. It seems like they're smarter, and it seems like they're a little bit stronger.
Well, we finally get a description of what they actually look like.
Yeah,
And,
it's
ew,
really gross.
Like milky white, pale bodies. She says, faces sunken in and hollow. Glowing eyes, gaping mouths, which all I can picture is Kristen Stewart. 2 sets of knife-like teeth. I mean,
Kristen
gross.
Stewart is a Craven.
Yeah.
It's canon.
You know what I'm picturing is like the original Nosferatu.
Oh yes,
Yes,
me too.
Yeah.
I picture from Midnight Mass, the horror, the show I keep telling you guys we need to do for the podcast on Netflix.
I love
that. You did?
I loved that show.
Yeah. I have.
Love you.
You watched it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I watched
creature.
part of it with Mindy and got freaked out. And our craft weekend was over, and I didn't want to watch it by myself. I was scared.
And then I watched
It's
it without
so-
her, and I kind of feel bad.
Oh,
You don't need
it's so good. But no, the creature from that,
Yeah.
which is kind of like the Nosferatu, like it's
Yeah.
kind of the same deal. But that's what I picture.
Yeah.
Is that?
But
Just
that one has
terrifying,
wings, right?
oh yeah.
Oh my
It is
god,
terrifying.
That's
Terrifying.
way scarier than anything I can imagine.
For some reason, the description of the Craven that bothers me the most is like the idea of patchy hair on their head.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why, but that is just like so
because
bothersome
to
to
me.
me.
That makes it feel very disease-ridden or something. Like,
Maybe
you know what
that-
I mean? Like,
yeah, maybe
mangy.
that's why.
hair falling out is really kind of gross.
It's upsetting.
Yeah.
Like it's not necessarily that I think it's gross. It's just it is upsetting at like a visceral level, and I don't really have an explanation for why that is. I don't know why that is, but it just
And
really bothers
For the
me.
record, my hair falls out constantly in
was
the
gonna
shower.
say,
So,
yeah.
I mean, it is gross to me.
No
I'm not trying to
shade.
say anybody who's
You don't
losing
have
their
bald
hair.
spots.
I don't, but
And
I will
I'm
eventually.
picturing like a Craven comb over.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
That's what I think too. Like it's so thin that there's like
Well, I
stringy.
think anytime your hair is falling out, it's indicative that something is not right. Right. And so, I mean, like actually falling out where you have bald spots. So, yeah, I think it gives you a really good picture of how they're falling apart.
Right. Well, I think a lot. There are probably a lot of similarities to the zombies in The Walking Dead.
Sure.
Right? Like
yeah.
when you are first in the Walking Dead world, when you are first turned into a zombie, you still look pretty close to your human form.
Right.
But the longer you are a zombie, the more like decayed your body looks, right? And there are people
because you're dead.
right. Well,
You're
like
decomposing.
there are zombies in the Walking Dead show that have hair falling out and that have like skin like falling off of the the skeleton. Like that's what I picture with the like varying levels of like decay and rot, which is kind of what she describes. So basically, they defeat the Craven, and the remaining Craven, I guess, like leave. Because do they kill all the Craven?
I think they kill all of them.
Okay, that's what I was a little bit confused about. So they kill all the Craven then, I guess, and the mist goes away, which is the signal of no more danger.
Right.
And so Poppy is trying to leave the Rise to sneak back into the castle when who does she run into?
Oh, Hawk.
I wrote Hawk with a big exclamation point.
Hawk. That sounded funny.
But yeah, so she basically runs into Hawk, and he's like, well, hello there. Fancy meeting you here,
I love
right?
how he compares her to Belle and Layla.
I know. Well, I didn't really put that together before this reading either, because she constantly is comparing him to a god. Like, this is what I imagine a god would look like, and he does the same thing to her in that scene.
Okay, Mindy, our word nerd. If you listen to Shadow in the Ember, it's Belle.
When I looked it up on the wiki, it's Belle.
I know.
Yeah.
So what the fuck is it?
I don't know.
Is this like Niktos Niktos all
It
over
is.
again? Just
It is.
whatever your heart tells you is right.
I called her Bella, like just because in my mind, I have an accent when I read these.
Well, no, in the audiobooks, it's Belle. It's very accented, very elegant.
In my head, it's Bailey. Like both of the Easers pronounce the same way.
Well, you're wrong.
But my French,
I think we're all wrong.
my French background would say that there would be an actual accent over the E's if they were
right.
But again, she's not French either. But in my mind,
I know, right?
That's what I think all these names come from.
Yeah. I didn't realize that he compares her to goddesses the way that she compares him to gods, or that she describes him as being godlike. And I really enjoyed that detail because I've never picked up on that before this reading. And she just freaks out so thoroughly.
Well, I mean,
and it's so
he tells
funny.
her, "You're absolutely magnificent, beautiful."
Yes. Well, and she's still trying to hide her identity from him, right? So, like, on the Rise, number one, she doesn't want him to realize that she's Poppy the Maiden, but she also doesn't want him to put together that Poppy the Maiden is the same girl from the Red Pearl. Yeah, from the Red Pearl, which also rhymes. I'm on a roll with poetry tonight, you guys.
It is Poetry Month.
I know. So she's trying to not talk so that he will not recognize her voice. She's trying to keep her hood up so that he doesn't see her face, but she's also trying to get away from him, right? Yeah. And so basically, like, a kind of comical fight ensues where she's trying to get away.
Dance almost.
Ooh, that's a good. That's a good description.
It's like an orchestrated, choreographed dance, but I don't know, and it's very sexual. It's super hot, even though they don't do anything sexual at all.
Except
me,
just like get close to each other.
Hot, like.
Well, it was hot to Poppy too.
I know, like they're trying to she sort of makes the first move in the fight where she and she surprises him with her skills, and then she throws that dagger at him, and he catches it, and she's like, "Oh,
I could never do that."
And he like tisks her too. He's like, I know. You're a bad girl.
And he reminds her like 3 times, which we've already covered, that's why I don't want you to have a dagger in your hand.
I know you're dangerous. That's why I'm like holding your arm down. Yeah, so you can't try to like stab me again.
So what does it say about me that I was totally turned on by this?
The same thing that it says about Hawk and Poppy.
I also say that at some point she goes, "He was insane," but like in the next sentence, she's like, "I bet I kind of liked it."
I felt like it should bother me, but it did not. Yeah, I wrote down too. If you're not a first-time reader, you know that Hawk and the man that she fought in the garden are like connected, right? And so I wrote down, he would have heard from Jericho, and maybe Kieran too, if Kieran was there for that. He would have heard about how she was able to fight back against Jericho. He would have heard, and he would have seen the wounds that Jericho got. But now he gets to experience it firsthand.
I think he would assume because she wasn't in mortal peril, though, that she wouldn't attack him. Because she's the
That's
maiden.
probably true, right? Yeah. If I don't attack her first,
arrogant and probably,
Because I mean, there's even a point too. Hold on, let me go back in my notes where she says, "Why did he have to have such a charming grin. It was the kind I knew numerous others had fallen prey to, and I doubt any of them regretted that fall. So I think
And she says, I know I didn't.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think he knows that she's kind of smitten with him, right? He
Oh,
even
yeah.
teases her about like watching him train and all that. And so I think he gets almost a little arrogant. Like, well, she's
Oh,
not
for
going to
sure.
attack me.
Well, for sure. Well, and as an Atlantean, he also knows when someone is aroused,
yep.
Yeah.
right?
Like he said, even in these chapters, he like smells it.
Exactly. So I think to your point, he knows, he makes a lot of assumptions about her as the maiden, but he also knows from their time in the Red Pearl and also like being around her a little bit as her guard, she's like super into him.
Yeah.
So of course he would think she's not going to attack me because I'm not attacking her and she thinks I'm hot.
What's interesting? Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I was going to say what's interesting about it though is that she smells his dark spice also.
I know, yeah.
but she doesn't realize that that's what that means.
Yeah.
Right. Can I also say how embarrassing it would be that every time you got a little bit turned on, your mate
I
could be
know.
smelling?
I know. Ugh.
I'd be like, what? I thought you looked cute for 1 second, dude.
Right.
Sorry,
Calm
you turned
down.
around
Yeah.
and I saw your butt.
I clocked a couple of different things that I was a little bit confused about, and I have a theory, but I wanted to ask you guys about it. So, when Poppy and Hawk kind of first run into each other, and he's like, "What's going on with you, strange woman on the rise?" She takes her bow from the bow and arrow, and she puts it on her back. And when she does that, it says, or she notices that Hawk has an odd expression. He has an odd look as she puts the bow on her back. And I thought that was kind of weird.
Maybe he was surprised that she trusted him.
Oh, to put her weapon away?
Yeah.
That might be
Maybe.
true. Well, because I put that odd look together with something that happens toward the end where they have been flirting, talking, fighting, whatever. And he eventually says, I know that it was you at the Red Pearl. And I also know that you're Poppy. Like, I know who you are. Stop, trying to act like, or stop trying to prevent me from figuring it out because I already know. And it's his eyes get slightly wide and then he like settles like he just figured something out.
I wrote that down too.
And gets really, he's like
So,
upset at that point.
Do you remember later when he says at the end of this book, and we are always spoiler heavy, so I'm just putting that out there, he bites her, and we learn later on in book 2 and 3 that he could taste that she was Atlantean. But he tells her that he suspected before he bit her. So I wonder if he smells something that he's like, huh.
Well, the second time he says it, and towards the end of this chapter, she tells him she can take care of herself, and he agrees. And then it says he drew back, brows furrowed, and then his eyes widened just a fraction, as if he'd figured something out. And so I asked the question, what do we think he figured out? Maybe he figured out that Victor was the one that trained her.
Yeah, they talk about that later too. I think it might be in the next chapter. At some point soon, they talk about like, you obviously know how to fight, and somebody taught you how to do that, and I bet it was Victor. But here's where I went with that. So when she puts the bow on her back, I'm almost positive that she says that it kind of hurt.
Oh, yes,
yeah.
she did, because she still got the welts.
Right. And so then he is talking to her, and he's been like very flirty and very playful this whole time, right? And then his eyes widen, and she says he looks like he figures something out. And
he
then
furrows him first, so he
he
so he's thinking.
immediately starts saying, well, I'll just tell the Duke that I saw you up here. And she freaks out and is like, you have no idea what that will make happen. And then he's like, what will that make happen? And I think that he like sensed her pain, or like realized that she was in pain when she was putting the bow on. And by the end of their conversation, he puts 2 and 2 together because he already knew something weird was going on with the Duke, and he realizes that the Duke is like abusing her at that point.
And that would make sense when she says, I can take care of myself, because that, that's what she kind of does.
Well, and
in that
then
situation.
at that point in their conversation too, all that playfulness is gone, the flirtation is gone, and he's like, you got to get out of here, let's go. And it's a very like abrupt change in his demeanor. And I'm like, I guess that would make sense, right? If he just realized, oh, I bet the Duke hit her, like she's been hiding from me the past couple of days ever
Right.
since that happened. But I looked up teasers from the Hawk POV book and didn't find one like that answered that question. But I don't know. I just thought it was kind of weird.
Can we talk a little bit about how he kind of offends her about being a woman?
Very much so.
Yeah, and he says, "Am I unaware of a new recruitment policy where half-dressed ladies in cloaks are now needed on the rise? Are we that desperately in need of protection?" And she's like, "What the fuck did you just say to me?"
My favorite part is later on. She said, "I thrust my knee up, aiming for a very sensitive part of him, the one that somehow made him more qualified than I was to fight."
Right,
Yep.
yeah. And so he's talking about how he's known women with far less beautiful breasts that could cut a man down without so much as blinking an eye. And then he says, "But none of those women are here in Macedonia." And she literally stops and goes, I want to hang out with those women. And then she's
I
like,
know.
wait,
what
far
do you
less
call my
beautiful breasts? What? But I wanted to look.
Are you saying you like my breasts?
Do you like my boobies? So I did want to look up some famous women warriors because unfortunately this is not something that's gone away, right? Like men are supposed to be
Absolutely
the
not.
superior fighters, right? But there's tons and tons. I mean, we could do a whole season podcast about women warriors in history that have literally changed the world just as many times as men have. But, history's written by the victors who have almost always been portrayed as or written by men.
Of course.
So I wanted to bring to light some kick-ass females who have led armies. So the most obvious one is Joan of Arc. She's probably the most famous woman military leader taught to American girls, right?
Yeah.
Joan used brand new strategies to influence the French battle model. But because she had visions of the Archangel Michael, she was eventually burned at the stake, for being a strong woman.
Right.
But there's a lot of research behind the fact that she was like starved and abused, that she was hallucinating from never getting food.
Right.
So, it wasn't really her fault. So, and I might mispronounce some of these things. So if you're a listener and you do know how to pronounce them, please feel free to email us, ournerdiestthing@gmail.com. So there's Artemisia the First of Caria. So Artemisia was a queen of Halicarnassus and allied with King Xerxes to command a Persian naval fleet against the Greeks. And she was known for her natural command and combat skills. So Xerxes actually looked to her for naval combat skills instead of being the leader himself. So number 3 is Bonica. This queen was stripped of her possessions, flogged, and forced to watch her daughters get raped when her husband died. It's horrible. So she got really fucking fed up when that happened, and she gathered troops from the Celtic tribes and razed 3 towns prior to them catching her and executing
Good
her.
for you, girl.
Yeah, right?
So wait, they did all that just because her husband died?
Yeah. Because
Like a
they
power
could.
play?
Yeah, because they could, yeah.
Well,
So he was in power, and then...
they deserved it.
They got what was coming
The
to
ones
them.
that she burned and raised, they deserved it.
So
Yes.
the people that she is talking about in this chapter, we find out later, are the Atlantean warriors, which I have seen most closely related to the Amazonian women in Greek mythology. So they were a society of women warriors who did not even let men into their daily lives except for mating to add to the tribe.
as they should.
Right.
That's all they're good for.
The last one was named Qing Shi. When her husband, Pirate, died, Qing took over the leadership of 2,000 ships and 70,000 pirates. When the Qing dynasty sent a fleet to disband her crew, Qing not only won the battle, but created an even bigger fleet by adding some of the rival crews to her group.
Oh my God.
Wow.
So he sent people to defeat her, and she just recruited them.
Yeah.
So she battled for 2 years against the Chinese, British, and Portuguese navies until she demanded amnesty for herself and her crew, but also negotiated to keep all of the loot that they had gotten as pirates.
Nice.
So, I mean, seriously, trying to research this, there were so many, I had to narrow it down to 5
Right.
that I thought were super duper cool. But, like, him saying this, like, when are we going to get past this fucking idea of women can't lead, women can't fight, and or that men have to lead and men have to fight? Maybe
Yeah.
you're a man
Yeah.
that doesn't want to do that.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I told both of you all before we even started recording that I was thinking about doing a deep dive into the differences in standards between men and women in the military, and I had to stop because it made me so pissed off.
For me, what's more terrifying about a woman being in the military is men thinking that they can use her body against her with
Yes.
rape and force.
Yes.
Or for themselves.
Right, exactly.
Well,
yeah.
again, I had to stop looking because things were pissing me off.
Right.
Yeah. So, and I mean, and we find in book 4 that Poppy is the strongest fighter in the world, probably,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the series
Yeah.
at this point. So, I mean, she could kick Hawk's ass in 10 seconds.
And he loves that.
I
Yeah.
know.
He does.
He's turned on by it.
Yeah.
He even says, "You're so incredibly violent," and it says he paused. I think I like it.
Yeah, I wrote that down too. That's one of the things I really love about this scene, but also Hawk in general, is that he sees Poppy for all of her strengths and all of these amazing things that she can do. And he is very much not threatened by it at all. Loves to see her do her thing, loves to see her be strong, even and especially when she's using it against him.
Yeah.
Right? Like he loves to see her be who she is and be strong.
And it mentions again how he hates the name The Maiden.
Well,
Yes, I
yeah,
wrote that down, too.
she says, he calls her princess and she says, "Don't call me that." And he says, "I like it better than what I'm supposed to call you, maiden. You have a name and it's not that."
Yeah, and then on the inside, she's like, "Yeah,"
Yeah,
but she doesn't want him.
motherfucker.
Yeah,
I
she
don't
doesn't want
wanna
him to know that she agrees with him. Yeah, I wrote down so many quotes of things that he says because this scene, I feel like it's very clear in the way that JLA wrote his dialogue. He's really trying to still like figure her out, but like he's already done for, right? Like
We
he's
get the most famous line.
well, yeah, the
this.
stunning, murderous little
Yeah.
creature. Yeah, but he says her shoes are as finely tailored as her leg. He says, "You're an absolutely stunning, murderous little creature." And then she's like trying to kick him and hit him and stuff. And he's like, "After all we shared," like he tells her, "I know you're the one at the Red Pearl." Yeah. And he's just being so funny. I wrote a lot of LOLs. If you let go of the dagger, there's a whole lot of me. I'll let you get your hands close
I
to.
wrote that one down too.
Yeah. And she made me laugh too. He's like, "What are you doing up here?" She's like, "Taking a relaxing stroll." Like, what do you think I'm doing up
Fuck
here?
does it
Like,
look like, dude?
they're so funny together. Just like her and Tawny. I thought they're just really funny.
JLA is the queen of witty banter.
She really is. She's very good at it. Kieran is really good at it too. Or she writes Kieran
like
yeah,
that too. Mm-hmm.
Like Kieran. They're not real, but I want them to be.
Sure they are.
I love they get super close. This is the part where she's like, my breasts were up against his, his hard chest or whatever. And they're both basically like, "Oh, hello." Like they're like way up close to each other and both of them like kind of stop.
Neither of them are like, maybe we should separate.
I know, right? I wrote down they are both just overcome with attraction, but also just connection.
Yeah.
And what you were talking about earlier, where Hawk suspects that she is Atlantean, part of the reason that he suspects that is because he feels this connection and this camaraderie with her, this comfort level that she's already talked about, right? Like, have I known him for like years? Because it feels like that.
Well, and part of my nerdiest thing of the week is I had to read the next chapter. I just had to.
Yeah.
And he even says, essentially, like, "Do you not feel this?"
Like, she definitely does.
And I forgot that he admits to it so early
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the book. Like, that, like, we feel super connected, and that's kind of weird.
Right. Well, and he thinks at first, well, maybe she's Atlantean. And so, like, that Atlantean part of me is connecting to that part of
Atlantean
her.
part of
And
her.
that's, like, kind of true, but also no, that's not what it is.
They're heartmates.
Yeah. A couple other things that I wrote down before I get into the stuff that I looked up from Hawk's point of view from this scene. Poppy says, "To be in the dark is far more dangerous than fear of the truth." And I wrote down story of her life, right?
Well, and she says that in conjunction with Tawny. Like,
I
she's
know.
honest with Tawny. She's upfront. She doesn't sugarcoat things.
Yeah.
We even find out in here that she taught Tawny how to take, like,
How to fight.
how to fight and how to, defend
The
herself.
basics. Yeah. Yeah. Because at this point, she has gone back to her room,
Yes.
right?
Before we go into Hawk's point of view, can we have a quick break to refill our cocktails?
Oh, yeah.
You've been empty for a long time.
Yeah, I need another.
Craft cocktails don't have to be fussy or ingredient heavy. Make and Muddle is here so that you can have a delicious 3-ingredient cocktail every time. Spend more time reading and less time mixing. Make and Muddle. Cocktail evangelists here to spread the good news about booze.
So I looked up on the Jaylanders Facebook page some of the teasers that JLA posted from the Hawk POV book that pertain to this scene and a couple of the other ones from last week. So first of all, I just wanted to read this from when Poppy takes her veil off when Hawk is revealed as her new guard. And he's talking about her scars. They were proof of what she survived, badges of strength. There was nothing wrong with them or her. I stepped forward, absolutely done with these comments. Both halves are as beautiful as the whole. I'm like, yes, Hawk.
That's right.
I love that. So this is the one I was referencing earlier from when he's taking her to the Duke's suite or whatever. I looked over my shoulder at those closed doors. She what? He pushed when I didn't finish. She'd looked at me as if she needed assurance that I'd be out here waiting for her. And that should have pleased me. It meant that she was already starting to trust me despite the short time. I figured the red pearl had a lot to do with that budding trust, but either way, that's what I needed from her. Trust. However, nothing about this sat right with me. But that feeling of this not being right didn't matter. So, like, he knows something is going on, but that's all we get from that. So he says, no, I knew what she was trying to do. It was a smart move, actually, but that's not what she got. She ended up basically riding my thigh, and I wasn't complaining, not at all, except the arousal thundering through me left me a little off kilter. It was too damn intense, too quick. Like, if she kept it up, I may do something I hadn't done since I was a young man and find release in pants without even being touched. And damn, I didn't know what that was. It made the floor of the rise feel like it was shifting as I lowered my cheek to her hooded one. Rattled by my response and by her, by everything about her, I said, I came back for you that night, just like I told you I would. I came back for you, and you weren't there. You promised me, princess. I'm like, ooh.
Which, goosebumps.
I know, right? I love that. I really hope those end up in the final
the cut,
release.
cut,
yeah, the final release. And so I also, that sounds inappropriate, the final release. So
I was going to get a final release.
I know, right? So those are from the teasers from the Cast POV book, but I also went through the other Blood and Ash books, Kingdom of Flesh and Fire and Crown of Gilded Bones. And I just searched on my Kindle for Rise for comments about this interaction, and I found a few. So in Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, chapter 25, Cass tells Poppy that he knew she had a warrior's strength and bravery. It's what drove you out to the Rise when the Craven attacked and fought back. Fought me. And then later in that same book, which is book 2 of the series, in chapter 38, he says, this kind of reminds me of the night on the Rise in Macedonia, except you're not wearing slippers and a rather indecent nightgown. I don't know if I should be relieved or disappointed, which I thought was really funny. And then in Crown of Gilded Bones, chapter 8, he is talking her through her bloodlust and talking about how brave she is and giving her different examples of that. And he says, that night on the Rise, when you went up there in that damn nightgown, his chuckle was rough. You didn't hide. Not then. And not when you went out to ease the pain of those cursed by the Craven. You've chosen things for yourself longer than you realize, Poppy. Longer than you've given yourself credit for. You always did when it mattered the most, and did so knowing the consequences, because you're brave. You were never the maiden. You were never truly helpless. You were smart and strong and brave. And then later in that same book, which is book 3 of the series, in chapter 22, he mentions her going out on the Rise as proof that she would make a good queen when they're talking about if they're going to take the crown of Atlantia. That this interaction from way back in book 1 is one of his reasons of like, no, you wouldn't suck at this because look at who you are.
You kind of already have the heart for it.
I know, which I really, really loved. That was fun for me to go through and find those. But yeah, I just love their interactions. These early, I always say Hawk just hits different, and he really just does.
He does.
He's so hot. he's not real, but he's so hot. Is there anything else you guys wanted to talk about before we go into Nerdiest Things of the Week?
No, I think we covered quite a bit there.
Well, who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
All right, go for it, Mindy.
I didn't have a super nerdy week, actually, but I did get to go on a field trip for school, which
Yay!
as a teacher, I've never actually done that before. But there's a book called The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. And it's by Kate DiCamillo. And it's one of my favorite books. She's a great author. She's a children's author, but if you ever have a chance to pick up one of her books, they're quick reads and they're really just charming and sweet. And this one's just full of like morals and in a good way, but it's just really sweet. And so
morals in a good way.
I mean, but like, it's not like
it's not like hitting you over the head with it.
Oh,
Yeah.
right. And so it's really all about love and being loved and receiving and giving love, which is just adorable.
It just reminded me of friends and giving and receiving and having
And when
and
you
sharing.
give and receive.
But the
Sorry,
main
go ahead.
character is a China rabbit. And so we got to go, the librarian and I sort of got invited to go with the third grade class to go see the play that they were doing at a local theater here. And we were all nervous about it because, like with movies and stuff, the book's always better. And it was a great production. I'm not like knocking it at all, but the book was definitely better. But we kind of nerded out over that, like what was different about the book
Yeah.
and what was different in the play, and
I would
whether or
totally
not
do
we
that.
liked like what the actors did with the characters.
Right.
And so we totally nerded out
Those
over that.
creative choices.
Yeah.
That's
So
fun.
it was kind of fun.
Field trips are fun.
They are. And like I
Sometimes.
said, I've never, as a teacher, I've never done one, or as a person that works in a school, I've never gotten to go on one.
Yeah.
Because you don't do library field trips.
Right. That's cool that they invited you guys to come. That's
Yeah.
nice.
So I can go. This week, Whitney and I got our From Blood and Ash book overlays that were drawn by Dominique Wesson. And they are really, really amazing. We knew they would be. I will say, though, there is a scene at the end of this book where Hawk bites Poppy in the snow, in the woods, and there's an overlay for that. And I got totally engrossed in the scene when I was putting the overlays in my books. And my daughter came home from school and interrupted me right when it was getting good. And I was so pissed off.
That would have really annoyed me too.
Buzzkill.
Right. Yeah. But they're really beautiful. I would highly recommend that you order them.
Yeah, they are.
Her art is amazing.
They're so good. And I keep saying about those illustrations, like, why is Hawk so hot? He is not real, but he's real in my mind. I had a fairly nerdy aspect to my week. So I've been working on a Blood and Ash infographic to try, from a previous episode, to try to kind of like make a visual representation of how the Ascended came to be. And so I made this infographic and like wrote out an explainer and was like, I feel pretty confident about the accuracy of this, but I want to post it in our Jlanders group that we're in because I don't want to be wrong, right? Like I want to be correct about everything. And golly gee, there were several things. There were several things that were like, well, what about this? And don't forget that. And you should add this. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And it wasn't necessarily that I was wrong about a bunch of stuff. There were a few things that I definitely like just had left out or was incorrect about. But it was just like, oh my gosh, I need to just like start from scratch and make multiple infographics just about like certain aspects of it. So making some more infographics is on my to-do list. But also this week, it might have been yesterday, JLA herself posted in the Jlanders group and basically made a big list of like the third Flesh and Fire book is going to answer all of these things.
I might
I'm
have
a little worried
squealed
that
a little bit.
you don't
freaking
think
wait.
that was an April Fool's joke?
See, I don't think it was. I really don't think it was.
Okay.
It was on April Fool's Day, but I think that they would have come back by now and said,
That's
like,
true.
just kidding.
Well, I do
Or they would have
wanna-
said it at the bottom of the post. You
Right.
know?
I do want to remind the listeners that we always record a couple of weeks in advance. So if you want to see that From Blood and Ash infographic that Whitney has made,
It's a draft.
it will be posted either on 4/3 or 4/4.
Yeah.
You can go back and find it.
I'm excited because I'm going to have to redo it. And I'm like, that's another nerdy thing, right? Like, I know I'm going to have to change and alter and add after the cast POV book, probably, but certainly after the third Flesh and Fire book. And I'm already like, oh, it's going to be more complete, more accurate, and like almost done, maybe,
Yeah.
and not going to be like, I won't have to edit it again, right? Because we'll have all the information. But then that also kind of makes me sad because it's going to be like the end of the series.
I'm sure
you know
you'll
what I mean?
find something else to make an infographic.
Yeah.
on.
Well,
or a PowerPoint, or
both. Let's do it all. But yeah, so that was my nerdy thing, which I'm continuing to nerd out about. But that is it. So next week, we are going to be discussing chapters 17, 18, and 19.
Woohoo!
Bye.
Bye.